All right, let's just jump right into it. I want you to imagine a weapon, something that bursts into flame the very instant it hits the air. And we're not talking about a small flame here. This thing burns at over 800 degrees Celsius. To put that in perspective, that's hot enough to melt lead. It's also this incredibly nasty substance that actually sticks to your skin and just keeps burning right through flesh, even down to the bone. And get this, it's a fire that water often can't extinguish. Seriously, the only way to actually stop it is to completely suffocate it, to cut off every last bit of oxygen. This weapon, it's called white phosphorus, and it is without a doubt one of the most controversial substances used in modern warfare. So what exactly is it? Why is it still showing up in conflicts today? And, why do human rights groups describe it as one of the most horrifying things you can face on a battlefield? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look at the science, the history, and the really tricky laws of war. Okay, so to really get why this is so controversial, we have to start with the basics. Let's talk about the science. So at its core, white phosphorus is just a chemical element. It looks like this waxy kind of yellowish white solid. But don't let that simple appearance fool you, because it is incredibly volatile. Its most important property is that it's what scientists call pyrophoric. It's a fancy word, but it just means it bursts into flames instantly, spontaneously, the second it comes into contact with the oxygen in the air. And this isn't just a little spark. The chemical reaction is incredibly violent. It creates three really distinct and powerful effects. First, you get that intense heat we talked about, hot enough to melt flesh. Second, you get this thick, billowing cloud of white smoke. And third, you get these burning fragments of the chemical itself, scattering over a huge area, with each tiny piece becoming its own little persistent fire. Now, those three effects, that's exactly why militaries have found this stuff so useful. That thick white smoke, perfect for creating a screen to hide what your troops are doing. That super bright flare, great for lighting up a battlefield when it's pitch black. And you can also use it to mark a target, basically saying, hey, aim here for artillery or airstrikes. And this brings us to a really, really important legal point. Because its main military purpose is officially defined as creating smoke or light, white phosphorus isn't technically classified as a chemical weapon under international law. And that classification, well, that's the absolute heart of the debate, because that horrifying burning effect is considered, legally, a secondary side effect. But let's go back to those devastating injuries for a second. To really get it, just look at this number. 800 degrees Celsius. That's almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the insane temperature that white phosphorus burns at. And that insane heat is so dangerous because of how it burns a person. You see, the waxy chemical literally sticks to skin and clothes. The fire is almost impossible to put out with just water. But what makes it truly terrifying is how persistent it is. These little fragments can burn straight through your flesh, right down to the bone. And maybe the worst part? Doctors have reported that a tiny particle stuck in a wound can just reignite days later if it gets exposed to air again while they're trying to treat the patient. So, now that we have a sense of just how powerful and dangerous this stuff is, let's switch gears and look at how it's actually been used throughout modern history. Okay, so its history really starts back in World War I. It was packed into artillery shells and grenades, mostly for creating cover on the battlefield. By the time World War II rolled around, its use was everywhere. All the major powers were using it. The Vietnam War, though, that's where the controversy really exploded, because its horrific effects on villages and forests started getting widely reported. And more recently, it's popped up again, gaining attention during the Iraq War. The U.S. military confirmed using it in Fallujah for illumination, and then again in various conflicts in Gaza. And it was during those conflicts in Gaza that major organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International started documenting some really troubling cases. They found evidence of burning fragments from shells that exploded in the air, falling in populated civilian areas. We're talking near schools, homes, and hospitals. Now, in response, the official line from the Israel Defense Forces was that these shells were being used for their stated legal purpose, to create smoke screens and hide military operations. And here's that crucial point again. Using it for smoke cover is technically legal under international law. And that right there, that brings us to the absolute core of this whole debate, this incredibly complex legal and ethical gray area. So the main international rulebook here is something called Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. Now, this protocol doesn't ban white phosphorus outright. What it does do is put clear limits on how you can use incendiary weapons. It says you cannot use them directly against civilians, and their use is restricted in places with a lot of people, like cities. So you see, the really crucial point isn't just what they're using, but how they're using it. The controversy is all about these things called airburst shells. They're designed to explode high up in the air, and when they do, they scatter thousands of these burning fragments over a massive area, sometimes bigger than a football field. You can imagine, if that happens over a city, trying to avoid civilian casualties becomes nearly impossible. So, this really leaves us with two completely opposite ways of looking at this. On one side, you have military strategists who argue that white phosphorus is a valuable and legal tool. It creates smoke, it lights up targets, and that's essential for protecting their soldiers on the ground. But on the other side, you have human rights advocates, and they argue that its horrific burning effects and the fact that air bursts are so indiscriminate make it an inhumane weapon that has no place being used in or even near populated areas. And you know, as long as there are conflicts happening around the world, this debate is not going away. It all boils down to one final, pretty profound question about the very nature of war. Look, weapons technology is always going to evolve. It's always going to get more powerful, more precise. But the ethical questions, they tend to stay the same. So it all comes down to this. Just because we can use a weapon like this, does that mean we should?